the Women Changing the World podcast, a podcast on a mission to bring you some of the most amazing women I know who are doing incredible things to generally make the world a better place. From corporate sustainability to straight up magic and everything in between, you'll meet the real life humans who are birthing the new. I'm your host, Liz Best, and I'm here to amplify the stories and voices of women who are changing the world. Welcome to another new episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. We are doing things a little differently over here this summer, and I'll be sharing a bunch of quick hit solo episodes on the topics that I get asked about all the time. Today's is the first one, and it's about, you guessed it, personal branding. Personal branding is something that is so close to my heart because it was really one of the first things that I invested in understanding as I was launching my business in early 2020. And it's also something that I've now helped dozens, if not hundreds, of women in the impact space work on, evolve, an update for themselves. And so today I'm sharing, again, all my favorite secrets, all my favorite tricks, what a personal brand even is. If personal branding is something that's been like hanging around on your to-do list for a while, if you're someone who's been like, oh my God, I know I need to update my LinkedIn profile, I don't know where to start. Or if you're really just ready to show up as the next level thought leader that you already are, this episode is for you. All right, so let's get right into this conversation on personal branding. I think the number one question that I get about personal branding is, what the heck is a personal brand? and, and I think a lot of times there can be a misconception about personal branding, this idea that you're like putting yourself into a weird box that's not actually you. I'm not really someone who believes in putting yourself into any box that you don't feel meant to be in. But what I think about personal branding as is it's really thinking about and being intentional about what it is that you want to be known for. There's some great quotes floating around the internet all about how basically if like you don't define your personal brand, other people are going to define it for you. I do think that it's true that you have a brand, whether it's something that you like or something you've thought about or not. It could be anything from like, oh, she's always on time to meetings, or oh, she takes really fantastic notes, or wow, she goes on the most interesting vacations. Like these are all things that, believe it or not, are 100% part of your personal brand. It's things that you're known for. And there are things that make people think of you. And so part of the idea behind personal branding is figuring out what the things are that you want to remind people of you. Do you want people to be sending you fun taco spots all over the coast in Mexico? Do you want people to be sending you articles all about regenerative agriculture? Do you want people to be sending you? I've actually been recently receiving a bunch of podcast recommendations for interviews with badass women in the personal professional development space, and I love it. But yeah, what are the things that you want people to see and be like, oh, this made me think of you? Personal branding is figuring out what those things are and then being really intentional about showing up for them. So if you're listening to this and you're like, cool, Liz, that's great. Where on earth do I start? Great question. There's really 5 elements. I mean, honestly, there's countless elements that we could get into, but in the interest of time and impact, there are 5 elements that I like to start with. The first one is what I like to call your North Star. And that is if you could change one thing about the world, what is the one thing that you would like to change? And ideally, this is something that is so big that it will take many, many people working on it for the vast majority of our lifetimes to accomplish it. Like, if it feels like something that you could do on a Tuesday, you're not dreaming big enough. And so, as an example, my North Star is getting more people like you in positions of power, specifically women and feminine leaders. That is the thing that to me feels like when I think about what I see as the key to unlocking the change that I want to see, it's having more women in charge of stuff. And so that's my North Star. So I invite you to take a minute if you are in a situation where you can grab a piece of paper and a pen. If you're not and you're driving, no worries. You can mull this over later or mull this over as you drive. But if you had to pick only one thing, and for those of you who listened to the podcast for a while, you know I love asking this question right up front. But if you had to pick only one thing to change about the world, what would it be? And that is your North Star. The next piece that I like to teach and work on with people is your mission statement. And that's something that ladders up to your North Star. So, if your North Star is like the big vision, your mission statement is how you work to create that future that you want to see. And this is something that I think a lot of people are familiar with from like companies and organizations. Like most companies, if not all, have some sort of mission statement, have some sort of articulation of like, this is what our company was founded to do. And I actually think that looking at mission statements from some of your favorite organizations, and if you can find them, looking at mission statements from some of your favorite people is a really great way to figure out what it is that you like, how you want to frame your specific contribution. For an example, like I've been working recently to evolve my own mission statement. Um, and so this is a work in progress actually that I'm sharing here, but like I offer executive coaching for aspiring CEO whispers, secretly spunky strategists, and change agents and founders who are tired of waiting for permission to create the world we want to see. And so, and you'll see I have like a few things kind of stuck in there. And that's really my how. That's how I'm working to get more people like you into positions of power. So, again, the mission statement is how you are working toward the North Star vision. The next piece, I think this may be one of the most fun ones, but the next personal branding essential, if you will, is really like your legacy statement. It's your Oprah intro, it's your tagline. It's like if you had to be known in one phrase or less than a sentence, what would your thing be? You may know because you're listening to the podcast. As an example, my tagline or my legacy statement is that I'm the secret weapon for women changing the world. So ideally, this should be like kind of catchy. It may be so bold that it kind of freaks you out. That's a good thing. I honestly had Secret Weapon for Women Changing the World in my back pocket for a very long time before I ever shared it publicly in the world. And the first few times I did, it really freaked me out. But I do think like if your biggest, boldest, most confident version of yourself imagines, I had a coach who described this as like imagines getting introduced on the Oprah Winfrey show, if that were still a thing, when that comes back to being a thing. What would be that tagline? Like what's the title or the job description that you would want to give yourself? That's really what your legacy statement should be. The fourth piece, and this one is probably the one that may take the longest. The fourth and fifth ones take a little bit longer, just in terms of like it's a bucketing exercise. And I know sometimes it's helpful for this to like get everything on paper and then like look for patterns and synthesize. But the fourth personal branding element that I wanted to talk about today is your personal brand pillars. And so people teach these in different ways, but basically your personal brand pillars are the buckets, for lack of a better word, of stuff that you talk about that reinforces your reputation as the person doing your legacy statement, as the person on your mission, as the person who's like pursuing your North Star. These are the buckets of things that you are known for. These are the things that people are like, hey, I heard this podcast and I thought of you. Hey, I saw this article and I thought of you. Hey, this cool thing's happening and it made me think of you. Like these are the buckets that would hold some of that. And so I think to get started, I would say probably go for it and brainstorm all the different things it could be. Like, what are all the things that you are passionate about? What are all the things that you love talking about? Again, this is not designed to put you in a box. It's really designed to like put some structure around all the magic that is already present in you and also give you really a resource as you think about if you are going to start showing up more as a thought leader. What are the things that you want to be a thought leader on? So, to give you an example of personal brand pillars, my personal brand pillars are women changing the world and feminine leadership. That's one bucket. Making sustainability careers more personally sustainable. That's the second bucket. Business as a force for good is the third bucket, and personal branding for impact leaders is the fourth bucket. And so when you look at like all the different things that I talk about and share, generally it hits at least one of those buckets. And that, helps keep me on track when I'm thinking about like, what is it that I want to show up and talk about? What is it I want to take a position on, take a stand on? What's really important to me? And bonus points, I totally did this. I wish that there were a way for me to transmit it via podcast, but I think it can be really fun once you come up with your personal brand pillars to translate them into emojis. So I will talk a little bit more about, I have an evergreen 3-day personal branding challenge that you can sign up for on my website. And one of the pieces of that is doing your personal brand pillars and translating them into emojis. So you can see mine if you sign up for that. And then the last piece, and honestly, this can and will be a podcast all its own, is around telling your story. And obviously, there's like so many different ways to do that. There's so many different formats that could take. But really, how you tell your story and like what like abbreviated bio version is on your website or your LinkedIn or that you're sharing for speakership opportunities. How you introduce yourself at a party, how you introduce yourself in an interview, how you answer that question. So tell me about yourself. Ideally, some of these foundational elements give you some fodder for answering those questions or being in those situations. But to give you a little preview of how I think about telling your story is I think what often resonates most with people, and I think often too can help you make sense of your own trajectory, is to really think about the moments in your life when you pivoted. It's actually not a super interesting story if it's basically like, oh, yeah, I got on this track and then I just kept going and now I'm here. It's also not a super interesting story if you're like, oh, I just kind of ended up here. Nor is it a super interesting story if like you don't really tell us anything about how you got to be here. And so when thinking about how to structure and how to talk about your story, I really encourage people to consider like those junctions. Like, what were the junctions? The moment when you knew that like you needed to leave something, the moment that you knew you were ready for something next, the moment when like a dream opportunity fell out of the sky. How did you think about it? What did you do about it? Why? And I think too, as you're thinking about your elevator pitch, which is like the shortest version of your story, it can be really helpful to tell people kind of like where you're at now. And so whether that is a junction or maybe it's not, I think just conveying how you came to be where you are today, maybe what the most recent twist or turn was that led you to do X, Y, or Z. And then also like what it is you're looking for, how someone can help you, like what your next twist or turn might be. I think really helps. We're humans and we love a good story. And so take people on a journey with you. And I really, really recommend in doing that you think about the twists and the turns in particular. All right. Well, that was a rapid fire personal branding episode. as you can tell, I love talking about this stuff, and there will be so much more to come on this topic and others this summer. But before I go, I did want to give you both some resources for this and some homework. So, first off, resources. I mentioned the 3-day personal branding challenge. That is a fantastic place to get started. It's totally free. It's on my website. You'll get 3 emails, 3 days with about 30 ish minutes of homework, maybe a little bit less, depends on the day. And if you want to like actually get some worksheets, get some videos, sit down and put pen to paper on some of this, that's really the best place to get started. If you finish all 3 days, you will finish with your own personal mission statement, your brand pillars, in emojis if you take the bonus challenge, and an updated LinkedIn headline and about section. Other resources include I do have a personal branding hypermind that I run from time to time called Magnetic AF. It's really fun. It's a hyper focused mastermind for women changing the world. And depending on when you're listening to this, the next round starts in July of 2022. But again, it's something that we do with some regularity over here. And I'm also in the process of getting a self paced option up on my website now. So take a look in the show notes to get the link for that. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you want to know when the next round is starting. We always have a wait list. So if you want to be the first one to know about the next one, be sure to send me a note. You can reach out via Instagram. I'll leave my handle both in the notes and as we conclude the episode via LinkedIn, via email. I'm here for it, and we'll make sure we get you on the wait list for the next round of Magnetic AF. And then finally, some homework, which is if you are thinking about personal branding, one of the easiest, I think often most confidence boosting things that you can do around your personal brand is ask 3 people. 3 is somewhat arbitrary. You can totally ask more, but I do encourage you to ask maybe more than one person to describe you in 3 words or phrases. And I would say pick people who you would be comfortable describing right back. Pick people who ideally know something of you, both personally and professionally. But just ask, if you had to describe me in 3 words or phrases, what would you say? And you might be really surprised by what they tell you. But one of the things that Stacey Magdaleno, one of my close friends who's on the podcast earlier this year, talked about in writing a new and better narrative for yourself is get the data, look for the data. And I think so often it can feel kind of daunting to start to figure all of this out, but almost everything is more fun with friends. And some data might be a great jumping off point as you figure out what it is you want to put out into the world, whether explicitly or indirectly when it comes to your personal brands. All right, that's what I've got for you on the personal branding front today. Again, I'm so excited that you're here, and this summer is going to be a lot of fun. So please know that my inbox is always open for ideas, and stay tuned for episodes on all kinds of things, from coaching questions to thoughts on how to run a more effective project or a meeting, to what to do about overwhelm, to saying no. We've got so much fun stuff in store. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. Please rate and review the Women Changing the World podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe for future episodes. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is liz.best, that's lis.best, or you can find me on LinkedIn by searching my name, Liz Best. Join my mail list by visiting elizabethbest.com/monthly meditation, and you'll receive all the latest updates on events, retreats, and opportunities to work with me, plus a monthly love note from my heart to your inbox. I am so excited to keep in touch, and I'll see you in the next episode.